flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This is the meeting of the Morrison County Board of Adjustment. The board is made of citizens from the 5 commissioner districts of the county. The purpose of this board is to review applications of property owners for relief from the strictest interpretation of the county ordinances. Our guidelines are established in state statutes, chapter 394.27, subsection 7. The decision made by this board is the result of whether or not a practical difficulty has been determined. If the board determines there is a practical difficulty, we then review the guidelines in the form of 6 criteria questions that are answered at the end of the applicant's request. A final decision is then made. Each request is evaluated on its own unique practical difficulty. Variants are granted to the land, not to the landowner. This board may, in addition, impose conditions in granting of variances to ensure compliance. After your public hearing is complete, you may leave if you wish. Our first and only item on the agenda is Bob and Mary Anderson, 5223 320th Street, Cushing, Minnesota. Application for a variance to construct a home and patio within the Bluff Impact Zone, located in Scandia Valley Township on Lake Alexander. Applicants, please state your name for the records.
Sure, Bob Monroe Anderson.
Mary Anderson.
Okay, thank you. And are we ready for the report?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Again, this is a variance to construct a dwelling within the Bluff Impact Zone and create a patio within the bluff. The ordinance reference for this request is 706.1B and E. Here is a plat map of Scandia Valley Township, and the red dot is the location of the parcel. And then here's the variance request received from the applicant. And then here's a site drawing also provided by the applicant. And then these drawings were not part of your packet, but I did email them to you today, but I've got them here on the PowerPoint as well. Here's an aerial photograph of the parcel outlined in blue, and then some oblique imagery of the parcel. And then here's some site photographs taken at the viewing on the 23rd. Again, the property is in section 26 of Scandia Valley Township, and it's on Lake Alexander, which is a general development lake. It is a conforming duplex lot, which means it's at least 50,000 square feet and 180 feet wide. The property is 224 feet wide and 74,880 square feet. According to the assessor's records, the 2,048 square foot earth home style dwelling was built in 1969, and the dwelling is 30 feet from the lake and within the bluff. A 30,229 square foot building envelope is available on the property. To the right here is that building envelope highlighted. The applicant purchased the property in 1997, and the applicant is requesting a variance to do the following. First, to construct a new walkout style dwelling directly behind the existing dwelling. The new dwelling would be within the Bluff Impact Zone, but would meet setback from the lake. The attached garage would meet all setbacks. And then secondly, to utilize the floor portion of the existing home starting at 50 feet from the lake as a patio area to serve the new walkout basement. And this would be located within the bluff. A new septic system is proposed to be installed as part of this project, and the impervious surface, including the proposed dwelling, is 18.93%, and 25% is allowed. And then here's that calculation. The applicable comprehensive land use plan goals is natural resources and open spaces, goal C2, Shoreline Development, Goal D1. And then the water plan goals and objectives, this is surface water goal, Objective B. Land use and development goal, Objectives B and D. 68 notices were sent, 3 telephone calls in support of the request was received prior to the public hearing. One was from John and Carol Severson, and they stated that they support the Andersons' request for variance. They are confident that the Andersons will build responsibly, and they support the request. The next was from Margaret Hershey, and she called to say she was in support of the variance. And Darlene Moldy called and stated she is in favor of the project and supports it wholly. And then here you're finding of fact and decision questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Amy. Does the applicant have anything to add at this time? I'm sure we'll have questions for you.
Yeah,
but-
sure. I guess any questions you have at this point? I mean, I don't think you want me to read through the document, the background information, all that. I think you've all read that pretty clearly. And we just, I guess, we come here, hopefully, we'll just state our case and see what happens, right? So we feel, from our perspective, that there's some practical difficulty just because of the home being there for 75 years. And so as everybody, I really appreciate everybody that came out there and took a look at it. I mean, to me, that hits home, because it's one of those, everybody thinks their lot is special, but this lot is pretty strange, pretty weird, but very nice. So I appreciate you coming out and taking a look at it. And I guess really, at the end of the day, from our perspective, it is a bluff lot, right? 25 feet 2 inches versus 25. And I guess from our perspective, we're here, talking about a variance of 2 inches, and from our perspective, that seems to be, pretty reasonable versus 2 or 3 feet. But no matter what we do, it's a complicated project there. And so we've been, I guess, patiently working with Amy and Sharon and their team. They've been very helpful. Been talking with these guys for a couple of years, right? January of 2020, I think. So it's not something we've rushed into. We've, I think, taken our time and trying to do the right thing. I think we're good stewards of the lake. I actually was on the Lake Association board for 12 years, and I got off the board simply because I was doing too much travel for my work. And actually recently just got back on the board because I just want to be involved, like what's going on there, and want to try to help to do the right thing. So I'm not sure if you have any other specific kind of questions or anything else you want me to cover. If you want me to go through, I'm assuming we're going to go through these 6 questions. Are we going to go, I'm assuming we'll kind of go through those along the way.
Sure, yep.
As you want to.
I think we'll find out if anybody has any direct questions that need clarification.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think, Sharon, you have for the record already that on the 23rd, Marv, Brent, and Dave were there along with you, and
Yep.
Clint was there on the 24th, and I was there yesterday on the, whatever day that was, the 25th, 26th. So, yeah, we all viewed the property and appreciated all of the information we got there. Okay, anybody on the board have a question regarding this request? Okay, Dave?
Just a few comments. Looking at first of all, the shoreline, is that I appreciate that he's left it natural. You see there's got some sumac out there, and the shore is very well protected as far as from erosion. And, looking at the lot and looking at all the difficulties here, I'm going to hear what my fellow board members have to say as well. But, and I want to say that I appreciate all the time that you spent working with planning and zoning ahead of this variance meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, good point. 2 DRT meetings, so you're pretty thoroughly informed on ordinance.
Yep, and I think as Dave said, I mean, if you look, the whole shoreline, right, 224 feet, I've left it natural. simply because who wants to be getting poison ivy going up and down those hills? Because I know there's some there, because I've got it myself in the past. But, yeah, I just plan to leave it, why mess with it, right? I mean, and that's what we're trying to get everybody to do on the lake. And to me, there's no sense in trying to do anything.
Yeah, it seems like the previous owner did leave you a little baggage there that might haunt you in the future, that those retaining walls that are not like they used to be, and, the landings that you have, the concrete that you might have to replace. And
Definitely, yeah, definitely. I mean, that certainly, I've had a lot of discussion about that, but it's like, I don't want to get the cart before the horse. Let's take care of
Absolutely.
let's take care of the important thing first, and once we get that in line, be happy to work with you guys on, what you suggest for us doing with that, because it's a big project in itself.
Anybody else?
Mr.
Mark?
Chair, Bob, when we were out there, you talked about the stair line that would have been to the west shoreline that looked pretty tough. You were going to probably remove that, and you would just need access to that. And another thought, and I don't know if you worked with or talked to Soil and Water about like maybe reestablishing some of the bluff, because the bluff is, crucial to us in that hillside. Was that part of your discussion, or have some thoughts about that rather than just leaving that concrete slab?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, those are called, we call those the scary steps there for a reason. They're jagged, and you have to know what you're doing there if you're going up and down those, and most people don't use that way. So for us to get rid of that and pull that out and make it more natural, that's a no-brainer. I think on the other side, by where the stairs are going down today, it's going to be a little bit more difficult and tricky. We need to figure that out. But again, kind of the thought was to somehow maybe have when you come down, have it kind of veer out, so it again can go into the bluff area and make that transition easy versus just kind of, right now it kind of comes down and then moves. Is that did I answer your question?
That's one of them, the question I had, and you were probably going to just eliminate the one side and just.
Yes, that side right there, is that you, Marv, that's walking
that
up
is.
there? I think that's you. Yeah, that side there. And as you can see, those rocks been there for a long time. They're starting to crumble there, so I'm going to have to do something with that here shortly. And I plan to do it as part of the project, but I have to see what this project ends up too. So it's a big one.
And then also part of that, then you were proposing, when you remove this house and leaving part of a concrete slab there, and then you would have some bluff area there, and reestablishing that. Did you talk with Soil and Water and what your plan was, or?
Yeah, I actually haven't talked to Soil and Water yet on that, but I have talked with Sharon and Amy about that, and I think specifically with Sharon that I need to come back to be at least 50 feet back from the lake, and right now I think it's, I don't know, 32 or something. It's hard to measure for me because you have to go out and up and down, but I think that's about where it's at. So that whole kind of front patio area there, that's about 10 feet there. So, and then it would have to go in a little further. And I guess until I see and know what's down there, I don't want to have just a bunch of cement there either. So I want it to look nice, and so I may bring it back even farther than that.
My concern is when this work is being done, the erosion control and everything else, so we don't have, obviously, being a part of the Lake Association, Alec is a beautiful lake.
Yep.
Not want to do anything to damage that
Right.
property.
Well, we'd have to put those. I'm not sure what you call them. The
Pavers?
well, in terms of just in terms when we're actually doing the building side, I think you have to have
Silt fencing.
silt fencing and all that stuff in there.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, as the applicant had stated earlier, as Bob had stated earlier, those things are not ironed out yet, and really not on the table tonight.
Yeah,
But they are
I'm sorry, Mark,
something to be
yeah, I
thought
haven't
about.
gotten that. So I guess what I will tell you is, in fact, Bradley Horst, who's our builder with Triple B, he said he's running a little bit late, so if you see this guy lumbering in, that's who that is. But he actually built a similar home on the Gold Coast, the Arndt house, John Arndt and Tom Spaeth. That was last year. So it's a similar, it's not a bluff lot, but it's a lot that's high up. And so he had to deal with those same issues with respect to, I mean, it was a clear lot. He didn't have to, deal with existing cement, but he did have to put the silt fences up and all that kind of stuff up there to abide by make sure there was no runoff into the lake.
Okay, thank you.
And if if that's something I need to do as, as a next step, we're certainly here, ready to do that. We just.
Amy, could you put this slide up, and maybe we could clarify some things about bluff, shore impact zone, things like that, what is allowed and what isn't. Could you review with us what is allowed in the bluff, what is allowed in the bluff impact zone?
So what's allowed from the toe of the bluff up to the back of the bluff impact zone, that's all considered the bluff impact zone. And no excavation is allowed, no structures, no impervious surface. We do allow stairways, lifts, and landings, so the ability to get down to the lake. When we permit stairs, we look for them to float over not be built into the landscape, but to float over the vegetation. That's least impactful and doesn't create as much erosion potential. So essentially from there to the bluff impact zone, really nothing except for stairways, lifts, and landings are allowed.
All right, thank you. All right, let's see, it looks like we've got, on this photo, we got 75 feet from the shoreline to about the top of the bluff, to the bluff impact zone, correct?
Correct. This let's see if right here is that 75-foot mark, so it's really essentially to the back of the existing house, or almost to the back of the existing house is where that 75-foot setback is.
And then with the bluff impact zone is another additional 30 feet?
Correct.
So 105 feet approximately back from the lake, or the high water mark is where
You're out of the bluff impact zone.
where he's out of the bluff impact zone and into over-the-counter permitting.
Correct.
Okay. Right, would you mind introducing
Yeah.
this young fellow?
This is Bradley Horst, builder, who I just
Okay.
told you would be coming in here soon, so.
Coming late.
We were warned.
You
you
gave
were
me the
coming.
warning. They were warned.
So I guess if anybody on the board has any questions for him, now would be a good time.
Yeah, he's been over there 5 or 6 times, and again, did the Spaeth house, and so he's familiar with a similar kind of project, I'll say, so.
Yeah. Well, and before we leave this slide also, could you point out the building envelope that?
I'll go to the slide that has that highlighted.
Sure, there's a better one, isn't there?
Yeah. There.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
a couple questions. This is probably going to be for the applicants as well as Amy, but I'll get to that in just a second. Looking at this slide that is up now, you had indicated that you were asking for a 2-inch variance. And I'm struggling with trying to understand this request for a 2-inch variance when the entire house is being proposed to be in the bluff impact zone.
Sure. So again, if this were not a bluff, if it were 3 inches less, then I'm 75 feet back, and that there would be no bluff impact zone there.
I see. So you're just you're eliminating this whole impact zone and the bluff itself and just
Yeah,
using the
I'm
75 foot.
I'm not eliminating it, but I'm saying it's, 2 or 3 inches, and to me, is that reasonable or not? I don't know, right? It's not 2 or 3 feet.
But the entire house appears to be within that bluff impact zone, and the garage would be the only thing out?
Yes, the requested build, that's why I'm asking for a variance, would be in that bluff impact zone, you're correct.
Okay.
Yep.
That's what I was trying to understand.
Yep, you're right on, you're
Okay.
right on. Yep.
And then I think that answers my question. I didn't have a follow-up for
His
Amy.
2 inches was elevation, not distance from the shore.
Yes, thank you, Dave.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else have a question?
Yeah, probably, maybe Amy. So when we're looking at some of these variances where, we want to be 75 feet back, and we could probably all agree maybe a foot, let's say there's 74 feet. The foot's a lot better than asking for 60 feet. So how much of a big deal is that 2 inches? Is that,
I'm not following the 2 inches either myself, to be
Okay.
honest. So
so
my
if it's 25 feet
my
or less,
understanding
it's
is
not
we're
in a
2
bluff?
inches shy of being a bluff. We're not,
Yeah.
so it's not asking for a 2-inch variance to ignore the bluff. So I think what the point the applicant was making is, it's the difference of 2 inches of whether we're calling this a bluff or not.
Correct.
So it's
Yes.
right on the
Correct.
cusp of that.
Yep.
That's not a variance ask. It's a bluff. It meets the criteria of a bluff. So there is no variance ask for 2 inches. It's
I
this-
understand
so-
that, but what I'm looking at is, I look at things if it's reasonable, okay? Yes, it's a bluff. Yes, we have a shore impact zone. We have our 75-foot setbacks. And when we make determinations on if we're 75 feet back, if somebody's asking to be 74 feet back, to me, that 1 foot is reasonable, okay? Yes, this is a bluff, but barely. What I'm asking is it barely a bluff? I mean, I know what you're saying.
Yeah, it's kind of, when the features of the property meet all of those, so it has to drain towards the water body, check.
Yep.
It has to rise at least 25 feet above the ordinary high water mark, check. Has to be at least a 30% slope, check. It has all of that.
Yeah.
It's a bluff. Now, the severity of the bluff, we've seen many bluffs where our grade is 50 degrees or 50% or 40% or it rises much higher than 25 feet. So that's all bluffs they're not the same, but if they meet that minimum criteria, then they're a bluff.
Yep.
So then I think then you look at stability of that particular bluff, the soils of that bluff, how impactful whatever is being proposed would be to that particular bluff. So that to me would be more what you would look at than is it 1 click or 5 clicks from being a bluff.
Yep. The only reason I bring that up is because, okay, so we got a cabin that's too close, okay? So he wants to move it back, he'd make the 75 feet, but not the bluff thing. So I'm trying to determine in my head, are we better off let him make him rebuild right where he is, move him back to 75 feet, and not get everything that we want? That's what I'm just trying to bring in my mind. That's why I was asking.
I understand. And maybe it would be a fair question to ask the applicant why they're not planning to just replace what they have right there and make it bigger than what it is. So maybe that would be a good question.
Yeah, you could, that'll be a question.
That existing footprint.
That's where we started, and that's where we spent the first 2 years, was dealing with that, right? And, because, hey, you've all saw the view there, I wanna stay there, but then, again, when I bought the place, I could add 50% on, and then was told that, the rules and zoning has changed. And so that's why the ask, and I guess, one of the things that I would like to see, because I can't find it, is I've been told, well, you can't do it. I would like you guys to show me that, because I can't see in the state guidelines, in the county guidelines, where it says that you know, why am I not grandfathered in to be able to do my 50% build on top of where I was when I bought it?
It came out of state statute.
Okay.
It was in state statute. The legislature removed it from state statute. So therefore, we can't be more permissive than state law.
Okay.
And so that came from the very top down.
Sure.
And so it had to come out of local ordinances as well.
So I've got a copy of that, okay? I've read through it, and I'd like you guys to show me where it says that I can't do it.
Because it's not in ordinance, it's not allowed. So we don't, the language allowing you to do that came out. So we
Well, I'm
don't
just-
change,
yeah,
when we update the ordinance, we don't say, you're no longer allowed to do 50%. The language just comes out as a permission, so it's not. So there was language in the ordinance in years past allowing that 50% expansion. When the legislature changed the law, then that directive was, okay, counties, you have to remove that language, you no longer can allow it. So then, in the next ordinance update, then that language came out.
Okay.
So so I can tell you, I'd have to do some research to tell you when that language came out. But I can
2004,
tell you,
2006,
but I
something
can
like that.
tell you right now, because you're asking now, I can't offer that to you because it's not in the ordinance.
Okay.
And there is no grandfathering right to, well, back in 1985, your ordinance said this, and I owned the property then. It just doesn't, we apply what's on the books at the time you're asking. So had that 50% expansion been in our ordinance at the time you were asking, absolutely. We would have been permitting that over the counter.
Sure, sure. Again, I guess, again, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm just, based on what I've read, and, because I've got the grandfathering ordinance right in front of me, and,
I didn't know there was a grandfathering ordinance.
it's a state, Minnesota state zoning law.
Okay.
It's right here. I've read through it, and
Well, if you certainly want to challenge that legally,
I don't want to.
Go for it.
I don't want to challenge it legally, okay?
So-
I'm asking you guys, because everybody says,
Well, that's an argument for a different time.
okay,
We're
that's
just
fine.
looking
Let's
at,
not, but.
we're looking at a
that's-
variance.
That's how we got to where we're at.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So again, I apologize.
it's a
but
good
I-
history lesson, but,
but
Well,
I think
yeah, I mean-
I think the question was, when you realized that the home you have now isn't able to be remodeled or rehabbed, I think what the question is why are you not choosing to rebuild and use that existing footprint and then go slightly back rather than demolishing and then excavating behind? I think that's the question that you're asking. Why are you not utilizing this existing disturbed area?
Okay, so
That's
what
the
do you mean-
question.
What do you mean to rebuild and go slightly back? So I can do that?
Your request would be, it would still be expansion of a non-conforming structure. It would still be
So I-
replacement. So-
Okay, so I could build where I'm at and just ask for it to be a deeper lot, you're saying, or a deeper building? You're saying that's a possibility?
Yes, it's a possibility. You'd need to amend your request.
Okay.
In the dirt meeting, though, we did say, the farther back, get it out of the shore impact zone if you can. Get it out of the bluff impact zone if you can. Utilize as much of your building envelope as you can. That is what we're going to tell you because that is what they're going to want to know why.
Yeah.
Why it needs to be there. So I guess that's on you.
Yeah.
Why does it need to be where it is and why, because of the bluff, what led you to the decision of putting this application forward?
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. Thank you, and you were very helpful in having me answer this form in the first place, so you got me on the right track and the right understanding to see and view things how you did, so I appreciate the time you spent with me ahead of time. So, so the two options in our mind is, again, to build where we're at and keep the same footings, or to go back 75 feet. The other thought is for us to go back behind the bluff impact zone. To us, that's not an option. I mean, for us to do that. Because, for one thing is, so now we have this house that's there, and so now we're gonna have to fill that in, and to try to restore that, I just think it's gonna be a lifelong project. I mean, that's a big spot, 64 by whatever, right on the bluff zone there. That's gonna be hard to maintain there. And I think it's gonna be easier, again, if you have a house that's right there, you have some stability to the structure there. To me, it seems like a reasonable ask to do that. And I would think you'd want me farther away from the lake than closer to the lake. And so that's how I reason with that thought, but, a lot of my reasoning isn't always in the right path.
No, I think that it was clarified very well. Anybody have any questions on what the request is? Okay. When Bob and I were out there, it looks like his request, the patio would be out of the shore impact zone, but it's still in a bluff. I mean, we're just talking, it would be about 50 feet, about 50 feet from the shore, the patio. The house would be about 75 feet from the shore. But, entirely in the bluff impact zone and partially in the bluff, where there is no impervious surface allowed in our ordinance. So I guess that's the thinking we have to go through when we start answering the criteria questions. So with that in mind, are there any other questions directly regarding his request tonight? Are we ready for public input?
Yes, I have one, Mr. Chair.
Okay, go ahead.
One comment, and that's what I was kind of alluding to earlier. It's just where I get in my mind is, am I better with him rebuilding his house right where it is? Is that going to put more damage or more, not damage, but risk to the lake than impacting into the bluff zone? That's what I was looking at, because he said his option is he's not gonna go. He's either gonna rebuild where he was asking for or rebuild right where he is. And that's why I asked that question on, how severe that is, and I guess a bluff's a bluff is basically what it is, so that's fine. But that's what I gotta get my head around is what's better? Him tearing that down, rebuilding there, or what his request is? Because the one in our building envelope that we would ideally want, he said that's not an option. So it's one of the two, either what he's proposing or that he does what he's allowed to as far as the grandfathering in of rebuilding the structure he has.
Without expanding it.
Without expanding.
Sure.
And that's where I was going with that bluff question is just got to get my mind what I think would be less invasive to
But
the
that's
lake.
not our decision to make, that's his decision to make.
No, but in our decisions on whatever.
He has,
Kurt,
he has a request in front of us
Well,
tonight, and that's what we need to
He laid
consider.
it out perfectly from my
Okay.
perspective. That's
I think we all understand what Clint was saying? Okay.
Yeah.
I do.
Mr. Chair, I want to make a few comments if possible.
Go ahead.
I
Mark.
mean, you absolutely got a beautiful lot. I think we all agree it, and the absolute beautiful view. And part of your comment you made that sticks with me, and you had said you wanted to be on that edge to continue to see the view of the lake. Understand that. And here with that old home, or the existing home there being removed and the bluff reestablished, you still have a beautiful view of the lake, maybe not as close to the lake, but a beautiful view. And I would hope if we do grant this, that we would put in a plan that we'd have a shoreline specialist and soil and water come up there to help reestablish the best ability. But it's just, it's our job to try to bring things back into conformity. And you have
understand.
enough to build a duplex there. I mean, it's absolute. And we don't have many of these lots on Alec, and you absolutely got one top-notch lot. So it's going to be difficult on some of these. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Marv. Okay, ready for public input? Okay, I'll have to ask 3 times. Is there any public input at this time? Is there any public input? Hearing no public input, we'll close this portion of the meeting to public input. So, are you ready for the criteria questions? Okay. Okay, the first question is the request in harmony with the general purposes and intent of Morrison County Land Use Ordinance and comprehensive plan? I think we'll luck of the draw. I don't know. I'll start out with you, Clint, on question number 1.
Well, I think with his plan, moving it back to 75 feet, getting out of the shore impact zone, meeting a setback from the lake, I think that is in harmony with the purposes and intent of the land use ordinances and the comprehensive plan. Maybe not so much into the bluff, but I think with moving it back farther away from the lake, what his plan is, I think it's just probably a little more less intrusive. Because otherwise, if it stays where it is, there's still going to be some impact on that bluff, even if he rebuilds where he is. So I would say going with the moving it back to 75 feet, what his plan is, I would say yes, it's in harmony.
Anybody else? Go ahead, Brent.
Mr. Chair. The other side of that is this request is to build and to construct everything within the bluff and in the bluff impact zone. I think there's, with the proposal that's in front of us, there's gonna be more destruction being done to that whole area by constructing this new proposed home there than there would have been if he were to have came in with a request to use that existing footprint basement to build up on that and move back. There'd be less disruption to that bluff and that impact zone doing that than there is with this new construction as proposed. And we do have an opportunity here where there is a building envelope on that property. If it is truly all new construction, you may want to think about having a conforming home in the future so that every single request moving forward doesn't have to come back before this board to do what you want with your property. Having a conforming lot, which you do, and having a conforming structure on that lot in the future is beneficial not only to you, but for everybody in the future, because that's the way it is. But to do what you've proposed here in front of us tonight, all that construction is going to be within the bluff and in the bluff impact zone. And I don't think that that's really what's in the general purposes and intent of the land use ordinance that we're looking at. So there's the other side.
Thank you. Others? Go ahead, Marv.
Chair, I'm basically on the same page as Brent is on this, and you've been a steward of that to leave that bluff in the shape it is. And the bluff we view as a very sensitive area. And here, if you would have came with some plans to partially reestablish that bluff, and there would have been some conditions maybe to this, I may have viewed it a little bit differently, but I'm viewing it as the way Brent, because if we do establish this and still have a non-conforming lot, coming back, there's some real value of having a conforming lot here too.
Yeah, your lot, 224 feet wide, almost 75,000 square feet. 30,000 is a minimum for a conforming lot, and 120 feet of shoreline. You have an impressive lot for the lakes in Morrison County. And you have a very large zone that you can build in that would not require any variance. Our ordinance allows for variances for properties with practical difficulties. They're really, the only practical difficulty you have is whether or not you can restore that bluff. With the plan you have, that bluff doesn't get restored. It gets, I think it gets, in fact, more pressure on it. Any plan building within the bluff or in the bluff impact zone is going to have a negative impact on that shoreline. The work that was done years ago, you can see it's failing, and there's a large tree, a basswood tree growing there. If that falls over at some day, that shoreline is not going to look as good as it does today. Time is not on your side with the structure that's on there now. And you're fearful that you can't rebuild that or reconstruct that bluff or bring it back into a lot that was stable and it won't erode and will filter water. I don't think that would be an issue. I think there'd be plenty of help for you to plan that and get that accomplished. So variances are all about the land, not the landowner, not your personal preferences or what you think it's what is best for the future of that property. I mean, the variance goes with it forever until possibly the next variance, if there would be one. You have no need for a variance with the large building envelope you have. Yeah, I guess I'd be just repeating myself if I go over and over on that. A restored bluff back to original with a building that meets all the setbacks would meet the intents of the ordinance, which is to preserve the lake, to preserve the shoreline, to preserve the character of the lake for all future users of the lake, people passing by, people using water in Morrison County, all of that. That's the intent of the ordinance. It's for them, not specifically for you. Anything else on question number one?
I've got a question. How many?
No more questions, please.
Sorry.
Okay, I think we're done with that part of the meeting. Unless,
That's fine.
Yeah,
I didn't
okay.
realize. Yeah.
okay, we're ready for number two? Is the request proposing to use the property in a reasonable manner not permitted by the land use ordinance? Dave, you get first chance at this one.
I looked at the property and I wasn't real firm in any real direction on this, and I really appreciate what Brent brought up. Is that I would have to say probably not, because that there's, that if he was to build in the envelope like we brought up, then that's going to be in compliance forever. And I think that there is, I thought about the difficulty of trying to restore that bluff. And you talked about dollar numbers, and I think that there's probably a lot of assistance for that, might even be economic assistance for bluff restoration. I'm not all sure about all that, but you might be able to get some assistance on that as well. So I would have to say that no, this is not a reasonable manner, not permitted by the land use ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to add to that?
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to say that I think Dave explained it very well like this. I know we're in a tough situation, but he explained it very well. And I agree with that totally.
Yeah. Okay. I'd like to add, it's not reasonable to completely remove a structure and then rebuild with a variance when you have a large building envelope like you have. So that's the reasonable side that I would look at on this. Anything else on number 2? Question number 3, will the issuance of the variance maintain the essential character of the locality? Marv?
Well, there are homes that are closer like that. Would you notice it from the road? I'll do the drive-by theory that Dave uses. You'll see it from the lake, you'll see it from the road. Is it going to be huge? No, it still will maintain the essential character because you look at the homes alongside it. It's not much larger or basically smaller than the one home that was just down the next block. So it would maintain it and it wouldn't stand out like a sore thumb. But you would notice it from both ends, the road and the lake.
Anybody else? Yeah, I personally think it would not be, maintain the essential character of the locality. You'd have a walkout, a patio 50 feet from the lake. I think it'd be pretty noticeable that this one stands out as being really close, and it's just a new construction. Why would you do that? No, walk out of the bluff onto a patio 50 feet from the lake would not be meeting essential character of the locality, even though, as Mark pointed out, there are some structures that are close as 75 feet. Anything else on number 3? Number 4, is the alleged practical difficulty due to circumstances unique to the property? Brent?
I struggle with this question, trying to understand exactly what the practical difficulty is. With a conforming lot there and the building envelope that exists, the proposed construction of the new home within the bluff and the impact zone. I have read through the applicant's papers, but I don't understand. I don't understand what that practical difficulty is. If somebody else can help me with that, I'd appreciate it.
Anybody else? Okay. Number 5, is the need for the variance created by actions other than the landowner or prior landowners? And I get to start first on this one. That's all because of where the previous landowner decided to build and the plans that the present landowner has come up with. Can't blame this on anybody else. Sure, there's been ordinance changes, but we're just going by today's ordinance and what applies today. Anybody like to add to number 5? Number 6, does the alleged practical difficulty involve more than just economic considerations? Clint.
I was just looking through what the applicant answered on this question, just to see what he come up, and I kind of agree. He put in here, there is more than economic impact. He's worried about the lakeshore environment. The plan will improve lakeshore, improve water quality. I'd say a lot of it's the economics, but not all of it. I do think that visiting with him, we all visited with him. He does seem quite compassionate about keeping the lake good. You could look at the shoreline, how well that shoreline has stayed native and things like that. So I think, I don't think that it's all just economics. Yes, it's a big part of it, but it's not all of it. Whatever way the applicants end up redoing this, I believe that they still have the best interests of the shoreline and all that stuff to heart, so I do think there's more than just economics.
Okay, anybody else like to add to that?
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Marv.
something I want to comment. I appreciate you guys since 2020, so 2 years you've been looking at, working with land services and trying your best to come up with something. I think you've came up with something, but I think there's something better that could come out of this here, and that's kind of why we're answering the questions here. I think it's just the beginning of something here, and I appreciate, so it's much more than economics. You're thinking about the lake, you're thinking about how to keep the view, you're thinking, working with land services, trying to come up with something, you're working with architect coming up with something, but I don't think you're right where this board sees it should be there quite yet there. So I'm sorry, but I appreciate you that. So it's much more than economics.
Thank you, Marv. Any additions to that? So we're ready to answer the questions. Number one, is the request in harmony with the general purposes intent of the Morrison County Land Use Ordinance and Comprehensive Plan? Clint?
I'm gonna say yes.
Dave?
No.
Marv?
No.
Brent?
No.
And myself is no. Number two, is the applicant proposing to use the property in a reasonable manner not permitted by the land use ordinance? Dave?
No.
Marv?
No.
Brent?
No.
Myself is no. Clint?
Yes.
Number three, will the issuance of variance maintain the essential character of the locality? Marv?
It goes both ways, but right now I'll say no.
Brent?
No.
Myself is no. Clint?
Yes.
And Dave?
Yes.
Number four, is the alleged practical difficulty due to circumstances unique to the property? Brent?
No.
Myself is no. Clint?
No.
Dave?
No.
And Marv?
No.
Number five, is the need for the variance created by actions other than the landowner or prior landowner? Myself, the answer is no. Clint?
No.
Dave?
No.
Marv?
No.
And Brent?
No.
Number six, does the alleged practical difficulty involve more than just economic consideration? Clint?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Marv?
Yes.
Brent?
No.
And myself is yes. How many of the questions were negative? 5 of the 6. All have to be positive. Is there a motion to deny this variance request?
I move that we deny.
I'll second that. Is there any discussion on that motion? No discussion, we'll proceed to vote. I'll take a roll call on that. In favor, say aye. Opposed, say nay. Marvin?
Aye.
Brent?
Aye.
Myself is aye. Clint?
Aye.
And Dave Boucher? Aye. Your request for a variance has been denied. I think I'd like to add too, there was a little bit of discussion about your request might have been better if it was just to expand on the existing foundation. I hope we didn't encourage you to go that way. Personally, my answers would be my answers would be the same to that request.
In the
So-
dirt meetings we had, that's why we didn't go based on discussions with Amy and team. That's why I didn't go for the variance on that matter, the past 2 years.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I can't say
Good,
what
make me
you
feel
might
better.
present.
I feel better about that answer, actually, so thank you.
But thank you for all the information and for your showing us around so well, and you have a beautiful lot, whatever you do,
Yeah, we're
it'll be nice.
lucky to have it, so, at the end of the day. Thank you for the consideration. So,
All right, minutes.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we approve the minutes.
I will second
September
that.
13th.
Motion made and seconded, all in favor say aye.
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 Motion carries. Old business, new business?
Mr. Chair, I don't have any new or old business.
Okay. Well, there's only one thing left to do.
Make a motion to adjourn?
Yes, sir. I'll second that. All in favor, say aye.
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 Meeting adjourned at 6:55 PM.